Show of hands. Who has changed to flat?
Who's changed the flat? Anybody has changed the flat? Anybody has changed the flat? Show of hands.
I don't remember when. So I guess no.
All right. Cool. So that's basically what I'm going to start with is just basic flat change. Then I'm going to move on to how to tune your brakes and then how to tune your shifting. Because those are the three things that are going to hit you if you're out in the middle of nowhere and something goes wrong with your bike. It's either going to be a flat tire, something goes out of whack with your brakes, or something goes out of whack with your shifting. It's basically all that you're really going to have to worry about when you're out there. So first thing, you're going to drop it down. If it's the rear, you want to drop it down all the way to the highest gear. So the smallest ring in the back. The reason you do this is so that when you drop this wheel out, you're not going to have to fumble around and guess, okay, which gear did I have it on when you go to put the wheel back up in.
Good.
A lot of brakes will have little pinch bolt releases right here. As you just turn and it widens the brake to drop the wheel out. Some brakes, they'll have like a little pin inside that'll recess it. That'll open up the brake where you can drop it out if it's fully inflated. But first things first, you've got the flat. You're in the middle of nowhere. Oh no, what do? These little guys are your friends. They are your best friends. Never leave home without them. Because flats are never an if, they are a when. You will hit that patch of flats. The first thing you want to do is basically start at the valve, and you want to break the bead away from the rim of the wheel. That's going to make it easier to unzip the tire. So just taking my fingers, going all the way around, making sure that it's loose. I take this little guy, the little lip right there, with a turn in, stick it up underneath the rim of the wheel, start and finish near the valve. You never want to be finishing, getting the bead back over the rim near the valve. You can pinch the valve. You hold it like this, with the bead over the rim of the wheel, pull towards you like you're pulling a bowstring. I don't know how many of you ever shot a bow and arrow before, but the closest analogy I got. And you basically unzip it all the way around. Baby. There we go. Once you've done that, all you got to do is reach up in here, pull the tube out. I'm using this, but of course there's frame pumps. You also want to have those. Never leave them without one of those. Because CO2 is great for reinflating your tires really quick, but you will run out of ammo. You've got one shot at it essentially, and if you do it wrong or something goes wrong or it blows, you're not pumping it up. You're walking home. That's why I always have a frame pump. The key to this, basically, you want to reinflate that tube just enough to give it pressure and listen really carefully, like hold it up to your face somewhere that's sensitive so that you can feel the air, if not hear it, as far as where that little hole was that will poke its way into your tube. Once you found it, let's say the hole is like right here. Hold it up next to your tire, find that spot in the tire, and then search around in there and make sure that there's nothing sharp that got embedded in that tire. That's why you always want to have a label near where your valve is. So when you put your tire on your wheel, always make sure you've got a label there. Whether it's the pressure label in my case, or like a little Pan Eraser brand, something, whatever the label is on the side of the tire, use that as a reference point. That way when you go sticking this back in here, and you're out of that sucker, essentially got a reference point that'll tell you where the hole was. So you can feel around in here with your fingers and see if it's still there. If there's something sharp in there that you have to pull out of the bead of the tire before you go sticking your new tube in. The next step is, of course, you want to inflate the tube a little bit. Just kind of work your way around, tuck it in, tube the tire. Make sure it's good and it's up and in there. And again, you want to start at the valve, and you want to use the palms of your thumbs to work that bead up and over the rim of the wheel and back in to the bead. You want to work that bead back over into the rim of the wheel. And the reason I'm starting here is because at this point it's the easiest part to move, easiest place to start, and I don't risk pinching this valve or ripping it or tearing it away from the tube. If I started on this end, by the time I got around here, it's going to be really hard for me to crank that bead over the rim of this wheel. And if I go too hard, I can pinch this valve and all my work is shot out. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your tire stays tucked up into there as you're going around. So you kind of want to hold it like you're holding it onto a table. As you get closer to getting it fully back on there, it's going to get stiffer. So you want to let some air out as you go. And this is the part where the gloves usually come off. Because by this point, I want to be touchy-feely. I want to get up close and personal. This is the one part where no glove, no love does not apply. And basically, it's going to get tough in some cases to where you might have to employ what's known as the lever trick to get it back on there. Because what I'm doing is I'm gripping with my fingers, rolling it, holding it with one hand, and then pushing it back over with the other. But if it gets way too stubborn, you reverse your tire lever, like the direction that it goes into the wheel. So instead of going in this way, it goes in that way. And you want to start at one edge of the fold, either here or all the way over here, and you want to crank it and roll like that. Got my bead back over the rim of the wheel. This way are not as necessary as you think. But once I've got that over there, next thing I do, check down and pull the bead and tire back, make sure that I can see my rim strips, that the tube is not sticking out from underneath where that bead is, so that when I go to reinflate it, it's going to get pinched. Both sides all the way around the wheel. The key thing is, unless you're in the middle of a race or triathlon, speed is not the key. Just take your time doing this. Because it's a flat tire, you're going to be trick to that, what I usually do, give a couple of pumps with my frame pump before I would go ahead and use CO2 if I wanted to get the heck out of there, if it's cold like it is today, to reinflate it completely and get it back on the wheel. Because you want to set that bead as carefully as possible all the way around the wheel. And it's harder to do that if you're using CO2 because it's just going to go, and all that CO2 is going to go right into the tube. Whereas if you have a pump, it's going to be a lot more gradual. So use your frame pump as much as possible, and then use the last bit for CO2. Get the wheel back in there, push down on this trailer, attach that bias gear, this steel frame's a little bit stubborn. I'm going to set it, so bear with me because this is going to take a set to get this wheel back up in here. It's a little stubborn. Old bikes are sometimes like this. centered in those drops. The drops being these stays right here, where it's nice and straight. You'll know it's not centered because you go throwing it back up in there, and it starts to rub on one of the brakes, something else is wrong. Most of the bikes here, unless they're old like this one, you're not going to really have to worry a whole lot about that because you'll most likely have vertical drops where it centers more easily. But that's pretty much all there is to changing the flat. As far as adjusting brakes, that's what I'll cover next as soon as I inflate this puppy. Because brakes can have one or two causes for why they want to rub. First being that the calipers themselves are out of alignment. The second being the rim of the wheel is out of alignment. Those little pops and whatnot, that was normal. That was just the bead setting into place on the wheel.
What pressure do you usually go to?
For a commuter like this, 80 to 90. Somewhere around in there. I don't run like 100 PSI or above unless it's like a fast racing bike like one of these. Typically, if you got an old steel frame like one of these, 80 to 90 PSI, what I like to do is call it basketball skin tight. It feels like you can barely push your thumb into it. Then that's often the right pressure. Because if you drop it a little bit, it'll bounce just like a basketball. That's how much pressure you want in there. You want that cushion of air that's basically going to, hold it up, give it suspension, because that is your suspension. And I just set my brake right there.
Another question. So do you recommend keeping some tire air in the tube itself before reinserting it?
Yes. You want to give it shape.
Yeah, okay.
It has to have shape before you go tucking it into that tire.
All right.
Because otherwise you're going to risk having a pinch flat.
That's it.
Now that's harder when you have super thin tires, like 23s and stuff.
Yeah.
But those don't really get used that much anymore. That's like way old school road racing stuff.
Right.
I've rarely seen bikes now that have anything below a 25 on them. There are some out there that do, but for the most part, it's going to be like 7 by 28 or above. As far as brakes go, there's two things that cause rubbing. Either the brake is cocked over like that, and you need to adjust it, or, more than likely, your wheel is out of tune. Which is where these little guys come in. Now I've got this on my multi-tool. It's a little spoke wrench. Basically, all there is to it as far as tuning the wheel is you just have to have some set of calipers that can act as like a buffer so that you can sense a bump when it goes by, so you'll know which side of the wheel to tighten. More often than not, that's what's going to be causing, like if you're going down the road and you feel like a little hump and it's rubbing against one side, that's a broken spoke. And the only real way to fix that is to true up that part of the wheel and pull it back into alignment with the other spokes. The way you do that is, it's kind of like tuning a guitar. All of these spokes are tensioned. So, if I were like on the side of the road, basically the best way to do this you want to flip the bike upside down. And then once it's upside down, you'll be in the perfect position to true your wheel if you need to. If that's what's going wrong with it. These guys down there, so this is set nice. Foot salad on the ground. This way you can true either your front wheel or your back wheel. But the key is, let's say your wheel is rubbing like this. I can basically use my brake calipers. I can press them with my thumb and feel where there's spots or spaces where it's gone out of alignment. If I don't see it, like if it's not just plain as day, it's rubbing right there against the side, like you can see the bobble in it. Sometimes it's more subtle. But once I feel where it's rubbing, I know that if it's rubbing right there, that means those spokes right there need to be tightened in order to pull it back into alignment. The key thing is you're coming in from the reverse side of the screw whenever you're turning one of these spoke nipples. So what you want to do is you want to turn to the left to tighten it, and to the right to loosen it. And you only want to go a quarter turn at a time, or one or two spokes at a time. That's the key thing, because if you go nuts with it, then it's just going to top it. It's going to get even more out of whack. So I can make a slight turn with my wrench on these two spokes, kind of pull them back into alignment, and then test it. Make sure that it's not rubbing in that place anymore. And that's basically all there is to it when it comes to truing up a wheel. It's just finding that spot where it's rubbing and then lining it up again by twisting those spokes. And if you ever get a spoke where it acts like it doesn't want to turn, like it's just stiff and it doesn't want to move when you put it with a spoke wrench on, that's okay. What you can do is loosen the side that it is on. In other words, you can take it and you can turn it to the right, the opposite spoke, and that'll allow it to travel back to the position it should have been in. That, more than likely, is 9 times out of 10 what causes any kind of issues with your brake truck. It's going to be like brake, it's not just your brake pads so much are out of alignment, but that wheel is out of alignment. It's getting wobbly. If you've got disc brakes, you don't have to worry about it as much. But if you like to take care of these things in real time, I know it's just going to bite me later. Next thing is shifting. Now if you look really closely on your derailleurs, there are two little screws. One's a high limit screw, one's a low limit screw. And sometimes it's different depending on what brand or what type of derailleur you have as to which is which. The key thing to remember is these screws control how far in and how far out this pulley cage travels to line up the chain with your gears. That is usually the first thing that you always have to set whenever you're dealing with shifting is travel that's on the it'll drop down in between where this chain ring is and the spokes and tear that all up, or if there's any kind of a gap here, it'll be rubbing against your outside drop. That's what those screws control. And it's also the reason why if you're shifting in the front, sometimes you shift suddenly and it kicks the chain off. It goes completely off. That means two things. One, you need to adjust your limiting screws up here on your front derailleur. And two, you need to adjust your cable tension. On older bikes like this one, they don't have as many barrel adjusters. Newer bikes, you do. The barrel adjuster is this little guy right here, and basically by tweaking it a little bit to the left, you tighten that cable, and you increase the amount of pull between where this pinch bolt on the derailleur is and where your shifter is. So by doing that, you don't wind up with something like this. Where when I tweak this, it doesn't go up or too deep. If this is too loose, flip my shifter, and it will make that noise. Thump, 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 like it won't go up onto the gear. That's the sign number one, but what you need to do is tighten that barrel adjuster and keep turning the crank until it finally press up onto that gear. Then you know you've got the right tension. Because they don't have to be banjo tight, but they don't have to be slack either as far as your cables go. You just have to hit that little Goldilocks zone. The key thing to tuning any gears, you want to go one click at a time whenever you're checking to see how it moves up on the set. So you don't want to just go up and down and up and down. You want to go one click at each time to feel out where there's any kind of an issue. Now, if you hear a rattling sound like this, that often means that this front derailleur is too close to the chain. So that inner limit screw right there, he's out of whack. So what I need to do, take a little screwdriver, get up on my multi-tool. Oftentimes it's a Phillips head. And I put back this little screw. That's allows them to kind of travel back in on the bike and not rub against the chain. See? Nice and quiet. That's what you want. Now, some chain rings are like this. If this one's going to rattle because the chain is super thin, but the chain rings are a little bit thicker, they've got what's known as a ramp. These ones right here are a particular brand that's meant to kind of give you a little bit of an extra oomph. You're shifting up into that movement. So when I'm all the way down here in these small ones, it's going to start rattling like crazy. That's actually normal for this bike in particular, but for a lot of bikes it's not. That one the same sound as I was hearing earlier, but I had it all really back. This time it would be rubbing on this side. And I would back it off a little bit. Just turn it to the left, loosening the tab. See that? Then pull on this, and it wouldn't be enough where if you shift that chain, would it be enough to keep those cages from rubbing against that chain. That's what's known as trim. Because a lot of the time when you're shifting up, most of your shifting is going to be in the back, but as you're shifting up and down with 9, 10, 11, 12 gears, however many you have, you get down into these, if you're still in your small ring, and you want to stay in your small ring, chances are it's going to rub on that outward cage of your front derailleur. So your shifter usually has what's known as like a little half click, where it has like a little bit of give. That's your trim. That's basically to move the derailleur just enough, and you'll have to feel this out, depending on what type of bike you have. But it'll move it just enough to where it won't shift it onto the big ring, but it'll keep it from rubbing, is what it'll do. The key thing that you never ever want to do with your drivetrain though, never cross train. You never want to have your chain all the way in small or all the way in big and big. You want to avoid that for two reasons. One, it strains the springs in your derailleurs, and two, it'll strain your knees. Because a lot of people, I mean, they'll throw it in the big ring thinking, oh, I'm going to really crank, I'm going to get the most wattage I can. I'm really going to get some exercise out of this. But what they don't realize that they're doing is that they're moving their knees in an unnatural way, and they're straining the hell out of their drivetrain. You never want to do that. Just the gears exist to make riding the bike easier, not harder. So it's actually more energy efficient to keep a high cadence no matter what gear you're in. So if you can keep it at a 90 cadence, it doesn't matter if you're only going 12 miles per hour. You'll eventually get faster. The key thing is you don't want to wear out your knees, and you don't want to wear out your tech or your mechanics trying to do it the other way. So never ever cross chain, because it's only going to wear this out, it's going to wear your knees out. But those are pretty much the basics of anything that you're going to probably encounter as far as like flats, shifters, brake issues, etc. The only other advice I have is when you're cleaning your drivetrain, WD-40 is your friend. This stuff, great for cleaning anything that you want to get grease, gunk, dirt, crud off of your chain. because this is a degreaser. It's meant to take stuff off. What this is not meant to do is lubricate your bike. Never, ever, ever, ever use this stuff to lubricate your bike because it takes off everything, including the lubricant that's meant to make those parts lube, especially when it comes to your chain. So if you clean it with that stuff or you use that to lubricate it and you don't put anything back on there, it's going to dry out and it's going to corrode and rust because this is still steel. A lot of bikes are made out of carbon, they're made out of aluminum. The chains are still steel. They will rust and they will rust to pieces. Which brings me to my next point. This stuff. This is what you want to use. The best way to lubricate the chain, you want to come down here and underneath the back pedal and put a little bit on like that. So it runs through the top of the chain. You never want to do it up here because that's just going to put way too much lubricant down into the mechanisms on this cassette, and that's basically the ratcheting system that's built into the hub. That's not going to need lubricant. What needs lubricant is this right here. Once you've got a little bit on there, you just shift up and down. Doing one click at a time. You never want to do more than one click at a time. You want to set it each gear, one at a time, up and down.
So then you just hold the loop in one spot?
Yep. That's all you need to do. The chain's going to move through it. So you just put it here. That way you're not that brings me to another question. Pedal changing. I know I had to change yours earlier. If you ever get sweet new pedals and you want to pop those bad boys on there, best way to do this is to let gravity help you. So, the easiest way to remember is if you pedal forwards, they come off. Whether you're on the right pedal, left pedal, doesn't matter. If you pull that wrench onto the pedal, you hold the pedal and you pedal forwards, it comes off. If you pedal backwards, it goes on. That's why the left pedal is reverse thread. And it's also why the bottom bracket, if you ever have to pull one of those suckers loose, is reverse thread on the drive set. It's left to tighten, right to loose. Because they've wanted those parts to come off in the industry and go on in the same direction. Because it makes it easier when you're working. So if I want to take this little guy off, I just pedal forwards, off it comes. Brakes, do the same thing on the other side. And if you've got a really stubborn, stuck pedal, this is the perfect position to be in. You want the pedal forward, you want the wrench here, because you can crank down with gravity and weight and let them do the work for you. So that if it's been on there a while and it's kind of stubborn and stuck, snap it loose. For the bike, something that's a jerk in that case, that's fine. That's why you want to have like a good stand to do this on. And by good stand, I mean something where you can kind of strap it down or whatnot. Whenever you put your bike in the stand, by the way, you want to basically have the seat post straight, like straight up and down. You don't want to have this level. You want to have it kind of nose to the ground because that keeps your front wheel flopping all around back and forth while you're trying to work the bike. Because gravity holds it straight. But once I've got the pedal off, I'm ready to put it back on. I just pedal backwards. And you don't have to tighten it like, you know, it's not going to come loose per se. As long as you've got a good little bit of snug fit to that pedal, it'll stay on there. You don't ever have to put Loctite or anything. The only thing you have to pay attention to is which is the right and which is the left, because the left is reverse thread. And you'll know this if you go and try and put this on and you start pedaling backwards and it doesn't want to start. Because that's indication number one, you've got the wrong pedal on the wrong side. And if you try to force it, you'll tear up the threading on your crank arm, and now you got to replace your crank arm and your pedal, which is money. One more thing about drivetrains, computers are your friends. You want to keep track of your mileage, not just for, basically seeing how far you've gone, how much exercise you've done. You want to be able to perform maintenance on the bike and know when you got to change your chain. These chains, you want to check their wear and change them about every 1,500 miles or so-ish. Essentially, when they reach about 50% wear, there's little chain tools you can get. They're pretty cute, pretty easy to use. They look like this, and they'll have little meters on them that say 0.75 or 1.0. That stands for 75% worn, 100% worn. I've got one of these that's marked 0.50 and 0.75. I use that one because when I check my chain wear, if this slips down in there, it's that degree worn. And you want to check multiple spots on the chain. You never want to check just one or two. You want to basically pedal around to make sure, okay, is this dropping in anywhere? If it does drop in to that, then that's how much it's worn.
What is the average life? How many miles on a chain?
About 1,500-ish.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because that's about the time, if you're commuting, riding for exercise, that kind of thing, when it reaches half its life. In other words, I would stick this down in there, and it would the 50% mark would slide right in.
What about for tires? How many miles on tires?
Now, tires, that depends on terrain. Tires are something you're going to have to look at. Just like you check your car tires to see how much tread you got left, you also want to check your tires to see, okay, how bald is it? How flat is it looking along the center of the tire? Now, there's a trick to make your tires last longer. What I do is, once I've had, tires on for about a season, for about 2, 3, 4 months, I'll take my back tire, throw it on the front, take my front tire, throw it on the back. There's always more wear on the back wheel than there is on the front wheel. Because the back wheel is where your weight, torque, like everything is coming into play. The front wheel is just for steering. It's just for steering and a place to hold like your hands. That's it. That front wheel is never going to be as worn out as the back wheel. So if you ever get a bike and the front hub feels crunchy, or the front tire looks worn out, or the front brakes look like they're almost down to nothing, you know you've got to check the rest of that bike. Because the front isn't that bad of shape. I guarantee you the back is even worse. Because this is where all the wear and tear happens. So the chain, basically you want to change it about every 3 to 4 months if you've been riding on a daily basis. Like if you've been doing at least 20 miles a day, that adds up really quickly. And that's why these little guys are your friends, because if you can catch it when it hits 50% wear, you may just have to change the chain. You may not have to change the cassette, and that'll save you like $20, $30, $25 on a cassette. Because the key thing you'll know that your cassette is worn out is when you throw a new chain on there and you get to one or another gear that you definitely use the most, and all of a sudden it's going skip, jerk, skip, jerk, skip, skip, driving you crazy, and then you'll shift to another gear and you'll be fine. When you shift back down to that gear, that's what you chose for the old chain. It got mated to that chain. Because chains don't stretch. They're steep. So they perceivably stretch out of alignment. And as they come out of alignment, it gets the portion that stretches. What the chain is actually doing is this at different points. So one of these guys is your best friend for checking, okay, it's hit 50% wear, I need to go ahead and change the chain. If I don't, I'm going to be changing the chain and the cassette in another month or so. And that's going to be about $80 instead of a $40 or $50 as far as replacing that part. But nothing on a bike lasts forever. Not even the frame, as I found out, especially if you're buying old French steel. The only other things that you're really not going to have to worry about on the road, but can help you diagnose stuff, if you ever spin your wheel and it feels thing goes for your pedals, your bottom bracket, your headset, which is basically this part right here. Any place that has bearings, eventually those bearings wear out. What you'll need to do is replace them, lube them, grease them up over top. A lot of these bikes, they're going to have silk cartridges. So they're going to last a long time. But at the same time, when they go, you're replacing the entire unit. You can't repack it the way you do. So it's kind of a give and take as far as these parts. But bottom line, it feels crunchy, it's not good. And if your pedals spin, like if you can just spin them like that and they don't set into place, the bearings are shot. At that point, you need to do because the pedals are often the first bearings to go because they have the most weight constantly moving. They're always moving. So they will go long before the bottom bracket, before the bearings and the wheels, before the bearings and the headset. Headset's off the last piece. When you can get the headset's out of whack, it wiggles. It's just rough. It's different on these old quill stems than it is on these guys because these are threadless stems. They're a lot easier to tighten and they're a lot easier to swap out. Because all you have to do is loosen the little stem bolts on the side and then tighten down the star nut and then tighten the stem bolts once you've shoved it together. These ones are a little bit harder to work with because it's a quill that expands in here. It's completely separate from what the stem is. Filling out what's going on, what's wrong with your bike. You just want to make sure that none of the bearings feel rough, nothing completely that should. You want to change your chains every 1,500 miles, about 3 to 4 months. You want to take it into your local bike shop and you want to have like one of the little chain checking tools. Pop it on several different lengths on the chain. See if it slips down in there. If it does, go ahead and change it. And see if you can get away with just doing that with the chain. If it skips, then you got to change the sack. You got to made it to the
Yeah, you talked about bearings and rust and combining those two together.
Yeah.
When you're cleaning your bike, is there any one part of the bike that you don't put water because of the rust getting, the water getting in contact with
So
it?
never use high pressure.
Okay,
Never spray with a hose.
okay,
You want to drip or soak with a hose, but you never want to spray it.
okay.
Especially around here and around here. That's your headset, that's your bottom bracket.
All right.
Those are still cartridges in a lot of cases, especially with the newer bikes. But water is not your friend. Because even if you've got a carbon or aluminum frame, those internal parts are still steel. They're still going to rust. You don't want water in there. That's another reason why I always tell people store your bikes indoors. I know it sounds kind of ridiculous because you're like, it's a machine. I don't store my car indoors. Well, you can do that with a car because cars have handling. They're meant to be exposed to the elements. This thing is not. It has a lot. No, garage is great. Yes, that's what I meant by indoors. Like keep it somewhere that's insulated, that's not subject to fluctuations in humidity, etc. Because anything, it's like you know how if you have anything you take to the beach, you leave it at the beach for summer, it goes to hell. Yeah, same thing. Salt, sand. That's kind of the way you have to think about these guys. That's why beach bicycles are terrible. Because they don't just have the usual amounts of humidity, they've got salt and sand that gets thrown into things. So just like anything that you take, it's like taking a car up to Canada or up north. It gets exposed to salt, snow, it's gone. Same thing with your bike. Bring it inside, that's the best way to store it. If you have a significant other that doesn't understand this, try to renegotiate. Like
How long do these last? We have a sale with pretty much everybody's is real busted or whatever.
they've got a pretty long half-life, but again, that's why I always have some. Because like I was saying, those things, CO2s, whether they last long or not, you can ride a hammer over this, and then you're screwed. So, yeah, like you just said, you don't have to carry this with me, but I would carry something like this, one of these frame pumps. And you don't have to get one very big either. This little guy, I found this little guy just has a little pump and the CO2 tank in one. Screw it. CO2 pressure goes right in there. Seal it. Intelligent hand. Yep. Big pumps are also your friends. I don't like having to use small pumps, even though I've got the arm strength of somebody that has worked on bikes for 10, 15 years now. At the same time, I don't want to have to put my effort into it. I want it to be easy. But that's what these guys are doing. Oh, the frame over there?
I've tried those.
How do you adjust your brakes?
So as far as adjusting your brakes, now on disc brakes it's a little different, but you still have this little barrel adjuster here. So if they feel spongy, like you're not getting enough pressure, it's not stopping you quick enough, what you do is you dial this little guy out, like a clip. You dial him out, and that increases the distance between where that pinch ball is to the head is up here at the lever, to where it'll bring those pads in closer to where they don't have as far to go to meet that disc. Now, the hydraulic brakes, totally different thing, because that depends on pressure. The advantage of hydraulic brakes, they don't need as much maintenance. The disadvantage, when they do need maintenance, it's going to be locked, because you've got to move that entire system and inject fluid back into it. So, yeah, that's what it is. This little guy is your friend. This is what's known as a fourth hand tool. It's used for pulling cables for shipping or brakes.
They fit their tanks. That's a skinny.
These little pinch bolts often used for 5mm. Pinch bolts is right here. That's what pinches the cable. What I'm going to do is basically work my tool in here.
I'm concerned about the rust. But he thought that it was because they go to the beach. You know what? That's for probably 1 or 2 days or something. And she says, he's so big.
Your back brake is a little spongy. It's okay if that back brake is a little spongy because it's a slowing brake. It's not meant to
I
stop.
saw that. What is your goal for next year?
Not the way that your front brake is. The front brake is meant to stop you. That's the bad way to do it. If it's an emergency, of course, you need to
I was just riding my bike 4 times.
Do you do the TV?
Twice a week, and especially after the pandemic thing. So,
Yeah, and also sometimes I roast them.
but,
Like,
and I appreciate it. And now the boys are 35